Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Queeries. My name is Brian. I'm your host. And with me this evening, I have, as a guest, a very dear friend of mine, John Michael Lander, who has been on the show before, speaking about where he had spoken about his experience being sexually abused as a youth as he was pursuing his dream of diving in the Olympics, and has written several books about that, and all of which are phenomenally good and phenomenally heartbreaking as far as that goes. And so at any rate, John Michael, thank you so much for being on the show yet again.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and how have you been doing since the last time you were here?
Well, this COVID thing has really changed my life. My normal is completely different than anything else. I've been working from home and doing a lot of Zoom talks and presentations. And that's been kind of interesting, seeing how that is moving in a different direction than I ever expected.
Yeah. Well, in terms of, because there's been, gosh, I mean, it's like, it felt like every other day there's a new revelation that some doctor for a particular, brand, gymnastics or, insert name of sport here has, been found to have, basically sexually abused, the individuals, on a team, et cetera. It's mind-boggling, how that goes on. So I know that one of the things that you generally talk about is something called predatory mentoring. Could you sort of explain what that means to people?
Sure. It's actually called predatory grooming.
Okay.
And that's fine. It's the same kind of concept. Basically, it's about how a person who is in the power position will actually groom someone to a point, and it takes over a period of time. It's not usually just a quick situation. And especially with athletes, it will be done through the parents first. They will groom the parents and get a friendship developed there and tell the parents what the parents basically wants to know. Like in my case, they groomed my mother in order that she was finally taught and believed that the only way that I could compete and continue to move up in the ranks of the U.S. diving was to go through this certain way. And that was through them. And so she basically literally hands me over to them. And then by that time, then they're starting to groom me. So like the coach would start grooming me. And it was after he had found out all this information from everybody else that what were my likes? What are my dislikes? How's the family background? All these things so that he could use that. And it's all a methodical and planned out approach. And that's why it takes so long. And I think a lot of people don't understand this. Sometimes we can see this done with teachers, through the church. Anybody that's in that position, scoutmasters, anybody that's with the children over a long period of time. And it's just constant reevaluating and reconditioning that person to start to trust the predator. And I just want to make sure it's very clear that we're all groomed. Every one of us, since we're born, we're groomed by our parents, what to like or what to do, what's the right things to do. And then we're groomed by our schools, we're groomed by our churches, our government. Everyone is telling us how to act and what to do. And so we are already primed to be groomed by these predators. We're just not aware that it's happening.
Well, and I know that, in a lot of cases, when stories like this come out, the blame immediately falls to the victim, and the family, and it's like, how did you not know? How did you, it had to have been obvious. So how did you not know? And so that's where the grooming comes in, correct?
Correct, yes. Because the process is such a smooth process, basically, that you're not even aware that it's happening.
Yeah.
And especially in sports, if we can look at that, because the world of sports is smaller and tighter. So we are just taught that that's the norm.
Right.
The coach is touching your body to put you in the right position.
Right.
That he's leaning against you. So these are just become norms for us.
Sure.
Now, in the real world, I think it's a little bit more jarring when something like that happens. If I'm trying to think of a place that, let's say you're at school and the teacher puts her hand on your thigh.
Right.
Although the teacher has been grooming you, that's a little bit different than when you're in a physical sport where they're actually manipulating your body
Right.
so that you feel it.
Well, and yeah, and to that point, yeah, you know, for like me, you know, having been raped, you know, that was my first sexual experience, and it was not there was no grooming. It was boom, it's happening, kind of thing. It is really jarring, and you know, and I think that, you know, for someone, you know, like me, I'm now very wary of allowing anyone into my personal space bubble. And in your case, again, you've been groomed and you've allowed these people into your personal space bubble because they belong there, and then they just simply take advantage of that moving forward, and it just seems natural to your point.
Right. Right. And I want to make sure that I share with you, there's more about our stories that are common,
Sure.
are very much alike. And that's what the second book is about, is my
Yep.
experience at the university. But you're absolutely right. The grooming is basically, you know, 93% of athletes who have been sexually abused knew who their groomer was,
Right.
or who their abuser is. And it's even higher than that because a lot of people are not reporting. And I think that's something else that twists and turns, you know. It's the same thing within the church and the Boy Scouts and,
Yep.
and things like that, because you know who this person is. He's usually, or she is usually a friend of the family, that everyone knows them, everyone likes them. That's why they've been brought into the family.
Right.
And it is a slower process than someone who's going to rape someone.
Right.
The raping can happen by someone who you know,
Sure.
someone you don't know, someone who's been stalking you. There's so many other elements. And I really believe that within the rape, which I completely believe is a violent crime, opposed to where sexual abuse through a predatory or grooming is still a crime, but it's not as violent until the acts happen.
Right.
I can even talk today. The act actually happens.
Right.
The act in itself is violent, but the process to it is not.
Right.
Where, you know, sometimes with a rape, it can be a date rape, which is a little bit different than someone breaking into your house and raping you. But, you know, studies have shown that even the people who have been breaking into homes or whatever have been studying that person before they actually did the actual
Right.
act.
Right. Yeah. It's, well, and, you know, and I wonder, you know, the fact that, you know, if you're being groomed, you know, as an athlete, you know, in a way, is the violation, you know, after you get done, after the act is done,
Right.
and then you realize what's going on. I'm wondering if, to a degree, the violation is that much more, the sense of violation is that much more because, again, it's a person that you've known. You know,
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I think any kind of violence or any kind of abuse is different and unique for each person. And I think that we have to look at that aspect of it, because what is, like what we were just talking about earlier about losing our pet, it affects certain people a different way. And,
Right.
and I think that's something we have to take into account. So I do believe that there is that whole trust issue that becomes in question through a grooming process, because you give over and you really trust this person. And sometimes you trust them more than you trust your parents.
Right.
And that's what they want, because then they can count on that. On top of that is the other part of it where it's all the secret. They usually will come in and say, you can't tell anybody about this because this will ruin how incredible this is between us.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to ever believe you because I am a well-known coach and you're just a nobody.
Right.
It'll be my word against yours, basically, they tell you. There's also times that it extends as far as, if you tell anybody, I'll kill your family. I mean, I've read stories where the predator has gone to that extent because they're so afraid of being found out.
Sure.
And so it's kind of crazy about that.
Yeah, no, it's, well, and, you know, I think the other thing too is that, you know, if you're talking about college athletes, if you're talking, you know, about, you know, athletes that are trying to, you know, become Olympians, you know,
Mm-hmm.
there's the whole, you know, dangling of the dream in front of them that, you know, if you say anything about this, it's all over for you. You know, your scholarship is gone, or you can kiss the Olympics goodbye, or,
Exactly.
you know,
Exactly. The same thing happened in the music industry in Tennessee. Country music, there was a young artist named Austin Ricks,
Mm-hmm.
who was completely abused by his publicist, which was Webster. I can't remember, Kirk Webster, I believe. And so he basically reported it and told everybody, but he had waited for a couple of years because he wasn't quite sure. And that's the thing, especially with athletes, we have that Olympic dream. That's only every 4 years. So if you miss the cycle and this is happening, you have to wait till the Olympics come around again, or your dream is gone. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something we try to normalize the whole action as much as we can. But in Austin Rick's situation, when he finally did report it, the statute of limitation ran out. Gotcha. So he can't process it.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot, especially with the athletes. And I think that's one of the other reasons many athletes do not come forward and speak, because first, no one's going to believe them.
Right.
Second, it ruins their chances of ever going to the Olympics because everyone's going to know about it. Who's going to want to coach you?
Yep.
And it's all these other things that go along with it.
Well, and if you look at gymnastics, I can't remember the name of I think it was the physician for
Nasser.
Yeah, and just
yes.
the sheer number was of individuals that he abused was just. It's like I almost couldn't process it. It's like, how does that happen? I mean, it's just shocking.
You're absolutely right. It is shocking. And I like to say that I have just been placed on the board of the Army of Survivors, which was started by 3 gymnasts from Nasser. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually get to speak with them and talk with them and find out. And what I've learned so much, it was the organization, U.S. Gymnastics, that was so worried about their branding and the amount of money that was coming in that they were trying to hide it.
Yeah.
And these organization schools, Ohio State University with Strauss, did the same thing. They tried to push it away so it doesn't hurt their organization.
Right.
And that's how they protect it. And so Nasser just started getting more confident with it. It didn't happen a lot at first.
Right.
And that's the thing. He was very careful. But he got to the point that he was actually abusing the athlete with the parent in the room with them, and the parent was sitting behind him.
Oh my God.
And he would use medical terms. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to touch you here. While the mother or the father was sitting right back there watching the whole thing. But of course, they couldn't see exactly what he was doing. So that's how brazen and confident he became, because he was protected.
Oh, it's just, and again, what's amazing is the fact that, they do, like you said, U.S. Gymnastics, Ohio State University, they do this in order to protect the organization and the reputation of the organization, and they think they're doing it, they think they're protecting themselves, and then when this stuff blows up, it's like now your credibility has just gone to complete crap.
You're absolutely right. And unfortunately, I am a victim of Dr. Strauss from Ohio State. When I was 15 and 16, in the first book, I talk about the doctor. Mm-hmm. That's the doctor, and I never named him. And now that he's passed, I can. But and it's interesting because when they started asking for testimonies, I was contacted. And when I gave the testimony that I was in high school, and I was 15 and 16, they quickly ushered that story away, because that brings up a whole new ball of wax that they didn't want to deal with. So they made it focus only on students that were going to school and were athletes at the school at that time. Mm-hmm. Anything else was put aside. And that's one of the craziest things about my experiences, was that he was part of a larger core of professionals who were supposedly helping athletes and students from Ohio State, Wittenberg, and some other places around the state of Ohio, but they would pass these students to other professionals that were within this group.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so we got passed around a lot.
So now in essence, it's almost like sex trafficking.
When I talked about this, yes, and I still am reluctant, I guess you would say, to accept that. Mm-hmm. Because in my mind, with sex trafficking, it's going up to Miller Lane and having someone sell somebody and they go disappear. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's so amazing how we will deflect within our mind to create meanings so that we can move forward, or that we can cope with it.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the other reasons I like to talk to you about too, is self-re-victimization, mm-hmm. which is the really big thing that I'm starting to discover and start writing about, is how we as victims will self-victimize ourselves. not by the basic of the event, but the meaning that we put onto our feelings that have happened afterwards.
Right.
That we're no longer good enough, we're dirty, we're all these things, and we embed them into our minds. And when something doesn't work out, we revert back
Yep.
to those beliefs.
Yep.
In essence, you're re-victimizing yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, in a way, it's something that you, I guess, in a way, already know. It's a feeling you already know, and there's comfort in dealing with something that you already know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I do.
It's a comfort. Yeah. It's your normal.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard to describe to people who've not gone through something like that, because they look at you like, to your point, they look at you like you're crazy. And, and so they make all of these judgments about you and how you're reacting to it without realizing, boy, you're really not helping things much here. So please take your help elsewhere.
Right. May I ask you a question?
Yeah.
After your incident that you talked about earlier, how long did it take you before you talked about it?
I did not talk about it with anyone until, I want to say it was 2015.
Okay.
And it happened back when I was in graduate school from 94 to 96.
Yeah, and people just don't understand why.
Yep.
Why does that happen? And I think they need to really take a moment and step back and look at our society and the stigmas that we put onto our society.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, men can't get raped. I mean, that myth is already out there.
Right.
And
Yep.
nobody believes it ever happens.
Yep.
If it did happen, it was your fault because you allowed it to happen.
Yep.
I hate that one. Why didn't you fight back?
Yep.
Another one that they just don't understand, because when it's actually happening, the brain does a lot of different things. There's the fight, the flight, the freeze. And I think when it gets that personal, when we're in a situation and someone is physically violating you sexually, it becomes so personal that you can't move.
Well, right. And it's like your brain is, like, I can't believe this is happening.
Exactly.
It's like I'm completely disassociating myself from what's going on. It's like I'm having an out-of-body experience.
Totally.
And
we're not prepared.
No.
No one's ever talked about it to us. No one ever talks to a boy about sexual abuse.
Right.
Now, if we were a girl, you might get a little bit more information, but we weren't taught that.
No, not at all. And on top of that, the mid-90s, it wasn't exactly like being gay was popular. So
Correct.
That added another layer of awfulness, to, what happened. So.
And in your situation, was there a power imbalance?
No, it wasn't really a power imbalance, other than, well, I guess maybe to a degree, because it was someone that, they dated people before they were out, and I wasn't.
Right. That is a power situation. And I think people need to realize that as well, is that if you have not come out as a gay person,
Yep.
you're still trying to figure out the ropes. And if you run into somebody who is out and proud and gay, there is a balance difference.
Yep.
There's a power.
Very
they
true.
know what's happening.
Yeah, very true.
And,
Yeah,
and they play on that. And that makes me very
yeah. And again, they decided that I was taking too long to, get comfortable with the idea of, number one, being naked with someone else, let alone having sex. And so he finally got tired of it, and basically, as he told me, given me exactly what I wanted. So, which was not the case. So it's, it's one of those things where thankfully I have enough distance from the event that it doesn't have as much power over me, but it did change me.
It totally changed you.
Yep.
It also changed the way your brain functions. And I think that's another thing that's important to look at, especially with children, because, our brains are not fully developed until our mid-20s to late 20s,
Yep.
especially for men.
Yep.
And to have such a violent, traumatic event happen, all of a sudden the synapses and everything starts to reconfigure themselves so that we don't feel those feelings or remember them as much. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of victims can't remember all the details, which is another form that our judicial system says you must be lying. If
Exactly.
you can't believe it.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's absolutely, utterly crazy. But at any rate, I can't even believe how much time has flown at this point. I need to have you back on the show again because I love talking with you.
I love talking with you. This is great. I'd love to do that.
In person, though.
Oh,
I
yeah,
bet.
yeah, we'll do it in person, I promise.
Indeed. All right, we'll be right back and we'll wrap up the show.
Good afternoon. Hey, welcome to our first cooking segment here on Queries. I'm Rob Austin, or Rob Waldron, owner and operator of Catering by Rob, and this is our chef, Chef Bailey McIntosh. Today, we're going to do something simple. We're going to teach you to make a chicken avocado quesadilla. It's going to be awesome. So first, we'll start with heating up. We'll leave it to Chef Bailey. We'll heat up the griddle here. And what do I get you first, Chef?
Let's start with, we're going to take some butter,
Okay.
cut that off of there. Open this up. And I like to rub down the griddle. Make sure it doesn't get too hot so it doesn't burn the tortilla when it goes on there.
Awesome.
So I'll leave that there for a second. And then I'm going to...
I take this out of your way?
Thank you. Cut chicken breast in half so you get a smaller dice. Cut it in some strips first. Take those strips, go back through, and make some dices.
Now, if somebody wanted to cheat, could they buy the pre-made chicken?
You could.
That they sell? Okay.
You could.
So this is just roasted, seasoned up, and roasted in the oven. Awesome.
And then I'll take a tortilla. I usually like to put the first tortilla down. Wipe it around just to make sure you get a good coating on there. And then I'll take the cheese, please.
Cheese.
I always like to go heavy on the cheese. It's the most important part of a quesadilla. Spread it out evenly through all the way to the edges. And then you start putting in your ingredients. I always start with the meat or the protein of whatever choice you...
So how much do you usually put on there? Just like a handful?
About a handful.
Okay.
I usually just kind of spread it out, and you'll see, depending on what you want and how hungry you are. But I do it about like that.
Okay.
And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in some
Bacon.
already cut bacon. Sprinkle that in there. Let's sprinkle some more because everybody
Everything's
loves
good
bacon.
with bacon.
Yes, yes, love the bacon. I also have here some sliced red onions,
Okay.
and I'm going to put those sporadically also. Place them on there.
And the onions just add to the flavor, correct?
Correct, and it just gives it some texture when you're eating it. It makes it a little more interesting. I like to put a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, and always my special seasoning, what I like to call Bailey dust.
Yes, gotta love the Bailey dust.
I'll take another. Oh, first I need some more cheese. Then I top it with cheese again, over top of all that, so that both sides get cheese.
You gotta turn it over?
Turn it over. Typically,
Some's always gonna squirt out, right?
yep. We're going to turn this up a little bit more. Make sure it gets the proper temperature. I typically like to get a good sear on the first one. We just didn't have it up high enough here, so I'm going to turn it up a little bit higher so it gets the good heat, get the cheese melted. I mostly like to have a good crunch on the outside.
Okay.
So we'll just let that cook for just a second. It's cooking, we can hear it sizzling.
So let's talk about the sauce that's gonna go on there. So it's an avocado ranch sauce. So let's see, we've got what? We puree mayonnaise, avocado, buttermilk, and
Sour cream.
sour cream with herbs and spices like dill,
Dill,
and salt,
parsley, salt and pepper.
pepper. Okay, and that just makes that sauce. So after
Garlic
that,
powder.
garlic powder. Okay, so after that, we end up just drizzling that on.
Yeah, that'll
as
be and that'll help garnish the quesadilla to make
Okay.
it look good. Anybody wondering how to properly open a avocado? They have a little pit in them, and you always want to take that off because nobody wants to
Here's our garbage bowl.
eat the little pit in the top. Make sure your sticker is off, which I have already done. Cut it in the middle. You get all the way down to the seed, to the pit of the avocado, and just let the knife follow it around that seed. Squeeze it open like this. And then you can just take your knife, hit it, give it a nice turn, and that pulls it right out. And we're done with that.
Hey.
And then you can take a spoon of any type and just follow it around the sides, and it will pop it right out just like that. And when you go to puree it, you don't want to put it in whole, so you'll want to cut it up into little pieces. Like so. And then that'll all just go into a food processor or a blender of whatever type you like. Add the other seasonings, and then you get this.
Great sauce.
It's a wonderful sauce.
Okay.
It's one of my favorites.
So should we try cutting that up now, or?
Oh, I'm gonna flip it over one more time. There, we got a nice little crunch on the outside. It's kind of golden brown. The first time around, we didn't have it up high enough.
High
so.
enough? Okay. So the trick is to make sure your griddle is nice and hot.
Make sure your griddle is nice and hot,
Awesome.
and I have it on about 375 right now.
So
Okay.
go ahead.
I think it might be just about ready.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. All right. So now we move it over to here. And I'm going to take a rocker, cut it in half, and then you cut it in fours, and then to get a little bit of a smaller pieces, so you can either share or just to make it a little
Great
bit
for a
easier.
little like evening snack or
Evening snacks.
or lunch or dinner.
So there's that, and they're all cut into little nice little triangles. I just like to always make sure that they're separated because that's going to make it so much easier when you
Awesome.
go to eat it.
So now that part that you love to do the most, the garnishing.
The garnishing.
How would you do that?
I'm going to start with some fire roasted salsa that we have already prepared. And I am going to put it
Just kind of plop it on
Just
there.
kind of plop it on there, give it a nice little look there. Could I have the sour cream, please? I always like to make the sour cream look like it's a little ball. So like so.
Oh.
And this, the most important part for this particular,
It's the avocado ranch
the
sauce.
avocado ranch, and then just a little bit of parsley.
Awesome. And there you have it. An avocado ranch quesadilla with bacon.
And welcome back. And just real quick, John Michael, in the few moments that we have left, all of your books, which are so very well written, and again, I have a personal bias because I love you to absolute pieces. Where can people go to get your books? I would assume just about anywhere, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, that sort of thing.
Amazon is the easiest and the quickest to go about them, to get them, because you can get them quicker. Barnes and Nobles and other places, you have to order to deliver, so that it's on order to deliver, and they don't have them in the bookstores.
Gotcha.
Because of the content, from what I was told. So that's what I heard.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we'll just say go to Amazon and pick up his books. They are all very well worth your time to read. And Thank you, John Michael, as always, for sharing yourself with us, and I look forward to when we can meet up again.
Let's do it.
Awesome. All right, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, and we'll see you next week.